Welcome back, everyone. Today we're talking about everybody's favorite Average Joe, what might as well be the default class, the Tactical, and how to set it up once you hit 4th Prestige. So the Tactical is a little bit of a jack of all trades. It does really good at both range combat and melee, but not as well at range combat as something like the Sniper or the Heavy, and it's not as good at melee combat as something like the Bulwark or the Assault. But it does do a pretty good job in both categories, and the way that I set my personal tactical class up is to just thrive at being average. So first we're going to run through the prestige perks here. We'll talk about them and then we'll get into the rest of the perk tree. But mainly I wanted this to be a class that would be super easy for anyone to pick up and play and reap all the benefits that come with it. So starting off for our first prestige slot, we have, in my opinion, what's probably the best out of all the prestige perks for the tactical acuity. So every time you land a consecutive headshot, your headshot damage increases starting at 3% all the way up to 15%, and it lasts for 5 seconds if you don't continue to maintain headshots. This is absolutely phenomenal for a lot of the weapons that the tactical class has. My personal favorite being the heavy bolter, or the heavy bolt rifle rather. It's exceptionally accurate, and along with this perk, you're just able to just drill enemies for massive damage very quickly. It also does work really well on weapons such as the Stalker bolt rifle and some of the more accurate bolt rifles that you have access to as well, including even some of the sidearms. Moving on to the next slot, we have Resilience. This is just going to help keep you in the fight a little bit longer and make those stims feel even more rewarding when you need to use them. Not really a whole lot to say about it, but it is something that will keep you alive. I've noticed as well that by having this perk, it allows me to feel more comfortable with maybe if I'm at lower health, passing up on stims to make sure that my other teammates have them as well, just because I'm already going to get that 40% extra health back. Moving in to the third slot, we have Skilled Supplier. This is just giving us a 15% ammo increase to our reserves. Again, something nice just to have, especially once you get to some of those higher difficulties in that where enemies can be bullet sponges. Having that little bit of extra ammo definitely makes the game a lot more enjoyable, and it will save you some frustration from time to time in that whenever the game director does not give you an ammo box spawn, you might have just enough to make it to either the next spawning point or until you find an ammo box on the field. For the last perk as well, we went with Fortitude, which is just an overall health increase by 15%. It's nothing huge, but it has been something that I've noticed has kept me alive on some of the higher difficulties. There have definitely been some attacks that I've taken where when playing with another class, I was totally expecting to go down. However, by having this perk on, it has saved me a couple times from either going down or when I've had a mortal wound just sitting in the respawn lobby. Overall, the tactical, it has a lot of flexibility with a lot of its prestige perks. I can't recall the name of it off the top of my head, but there is another perk that allows you to, if you miss your Auspex scan, you get a second chance at it. I was very tempted to run that one. However, most of the time, I didn't really feel like if I missed the first one, I was at any sort of a loss, just because this class does fairly well without it. Moving into our main perks here, the first perk that I always pick is Balanced Distribution. This gives us a 10% primary weapon damage increase at the cost of losing 10% for our sidearm. Personally, this doesn't bother me a whole lot, especially whenever I'm using something like the heavy bolt rifle and I'm pairing it with Acuity. I'm really able to dish out a lot of damage very quickly, and especially on Tyranid missions, if I'm taking out like a Majoris or an extremist enemy, just by knocking them out, a lot of times that's going to clear up a lot of the Minoris that are around them. So I haven't really felt that big of an urge to constantly switch over to my sidearm. Now, if you are a big fan of the Plasma Incinerator, I would recommend Plasma Boost instead. Myself, not crazy about that particular rifle, so I do tend to stick with balanced distribution. The next perk that I pick is Relentless Pursuit. Essentially, anytime you do a gun strike for 5 seconds, you're going to deal 25% more range damage. This does pair really, really well with the Melta rifle, especially because you're going to be up close typically when you're using that. But you can get use out of it as well from any other weapon, including your sidearms. If you're not a fan of that, or if you are someone who is worried about the 10% damage loss to your secondary, the other perk I would recommend would be Versatility, which is after any time you switch your weapons, your secondary weapon gains 25% more damage. And this lasts until you either reload or switch back to your primary. Now, with the 10% reduction, you're only going to get 15 out of this, but it still will increase the overall viability by about 15%. So just something to keep in mind if you don't want the extra damage following the gun strike. I personally run a lot of fencing melee weapons, so gun strikes happen a lot. I personally find that I get more use out of Relentless Pursuit. Finally, Emperor's Vengeance to round out the core perks. Anytime you kill a Majoris level enemy or higher, you get 1 additional magazine added back to your ammo pool. There's a cooldown of 30 seconds, but I think it's very well worth it. It's something that's going to keep some of your weapons in the fight, and again, hopefully hold you over until you're able to find either an ammo box or an ammo crate. Now, moving into the team slots, personally, I think there's a couple perks in here that work really, really well. Actually, all 3 of them do. I would say pick whichever one you feel best benefits the team. For me personally, that's Transhuman Physiology, mostly because I'm playing a lot of times on Ruthless or higher. This is just a nice way to make sure that if I get stun locked or something like that, I'm able to bounce back a lot of damage, or I'm able to heal myself a little bit better and possibly forego having to use something like a stim. The other perk, though, that I would recommend is Allied Aim, just because it's a general 15% range damage increase for everyone on the team. It's something that everyone can use, and it really helps out classes such as the Bulwark and Assault, where they only have access to a secondary weapon. Moving into the gear slot, now the way I kind of use my Auspex scan is really to thin out the Majoris, since Minoris a lot of times are incredibly easy to deal with, but I do just like being able to take some of those bigger enemies out of the fight and then clean up whatever's left. So for me personally, I start off with priority targeting. It does make the Auspex last 8 seconds, or it lasts 8 seconds longer. The base is 8. However, you're not going to get any Minoris enemies with it, which again, I'm using this build to focus on Majoris and higher. Second perk that I'll take is Battle Focus, so anytime that you get a perfectly timed parry or block, it's going to mark an enemy, and you're going to get all the same benefits from the Auspex scan on that particular enemy. This will work on anything that survives your perfect parry or block. Finally, I go with Expert Timing, which does shrink the duration of the Auspex by 4 seconds. However, in exchange for that, you do deal an additional 75% damage. Again, with something like the Heavy Bolt Rifle, which is extremely accurate, and some of the other perks that we have, you're even on Absolute, you're just able to clear Majoris enemies off the board like it's nothing. Now, moving on into the 2 signature perks. For me, there's really 2 good options for this. The first one, Signal Jammer, I don't think it's worth really wasting your Auspex scan on that. If you are struggling, though, with waves, if you're new to the game, maybe it would be worth running, but I've definitely gotten a lot more use out of the last 2 perks. So I do kind of change back and forth between these 2, but I think my new favorite has been Radiating Impact. So anytime that you perform a melee finisher on any enemy, doesn't matter what rank they are, you get a massive area of effect damage within 10 meters, cools down, as you can see here, in 90 seconds. However, the amount of damage that you get within that 10 meter radius is absolutely astonishing. There have been times where I've maybe only had a couple shots on like a Majorist or an extremist enemy that's nearby, but just because they were in that 10 meter radius, whenever I did perform an execution, it was able to knock them and allow me to execute them and following the current execution that I was working on. Or there have been other times I really love this, especially with some of the chaos missions. So as a lot of you have probably noticed, when you're fighting the Tyranids, if you eliminate the Majorist enemy, a lot of the Minoris surrounding them will just die off. This kind of gives you the same effect when you're fighting Chaos, because if you do have a lot of the Chaos cultists or little demons around, and you're executing something like a Rubric Marine, as long as everything's within 10 meters, you're going to completely wipe the board of everything that's immediately surrounding you. Again, there is a cooldown on this for 90 seconds, and sometimes, you know, it's not always the most consistent. So if you don't feel like running this, Mark for Death is absolutely phenomenal. Now, this does have a little bit of a longer cooldown time. However, when you mark something with your Auspex, that being a Majorist or Extremist, all it takes is one headshot and it'll instantly kill it. So it doesn't matter if they have full health or not. So let's say you have like a Zoranthrope, you immediately mark it with the Auspex, pop one headshot at it. That's it, it's completely done. You don't have to worry about executing it. It's off the board entirely. This is definitely really huge if you are playing with people, or even if you're newer in that and you find yourself struggling with some of the extremist level enemies that are out there. This is an absolutely easy way to kind of tilt the game in your favor. But overall, that's my build for the tactical. I would say after kind of going through and playing with it some more, I do still really enjoy this class. It's still going to be one of my least played ones, but I did have a lot of fun going back and playing around with it. Real quick, I'll show you just the three classes that I personally use. The main one is my second loadout, Heavy Bolt Rifle. I've pretty much entirely switched over to the Heavy Bolt Pistol and the Chainsword. Then I do have the Bolt Rifle with the Grenade Launcher attachment. Just sometimes it's fun to start lobbing grenades like Hail Marys and watch everything immediately die around you. And finally, the Stalker Bolt Rifle. Truthfully, I prefer this when I'm running Chaos missions, just because a lot of the Rubric Marines and even some of the cultists, they're quite capable of dishing out range damage. So having almost like that DMR style rifle in that really does a phenomenal job of allowing you to eliminate some of the more important targets without necessarily having to expose yourself to the combat. But that's all we got for this week. Thank you as always, and tune in next time for when we're going to be going over the Assault class, which currently working on finishing up right now, and I can't wait to be done with it. I've decided Assault's my least favorite class, but we'll talk about that next time. As always, thank you, and we will catch you next time.